and also a little bit of the history there, and some of the things that have just been milestones that have just been accomplished by the magazine. Tim, go ahead and take over.
Well, hey, Mike, thanks to everybody for having me. And I do want to offer our condolences to the family. Lori and Leo were great people, and I was saddened to hear about the news. Fantastic layout, and actually, I'm going to go through, as you mentioned, a little bit of history of the magazine and kind of some milestones. And one of the I pulled a few issues, and one of the issues I pulled was of their layout that we did a feature on. But anyway, how many folks do we have here, Mike?
Right now we got 25 and people still joining in. So. Okay.
So educate me a little bit on what's the membership of the division now?
170, 168, somewhere in that neighborhood right now.
And how many folks are joining these meetings consistently?
We normally have anywhere from 38 to 45 bumping in from anywhere around the world, literally. Okay. We've had Kuwait, England, Australia.
Oh, wow.
Right now I see Jason Parham's on with, he's from in Alabama. We typically have some people in Mississippi. Hello? Hello? So we typically have some people coming in from Louisiana, Oklahoma, West Texas. We also have Arizona and California. So yeah.
Okay, well, that's quite a contingent compared to what the Cowcatcher division was in 2003. And I'll take you back to that time. The Cowcatcher division back then had members, but it was pretty much dormant, and it had been for a number of years. And at one point, back in the 60s, I believe, 70s, the division had pretty strong representation, and they had monthly meetings, and just really had something really special going on. And then over time, as organizations tend to do, they kind of drop off a little bit. And so there's a fellow by the name of Jim Howard that was a member of the division. I guess he was maybe elected president. Either he took the initiative to do it, or he wasn't presiding over much because there wasn't much going on. So I had been an NMRA member and really had not gotten much out of being a member because nothing was going on. So we come home from vacation, and there's an email waiting for me that says the Cowcatcher division is having a meeting. We're gonna get this going, and we want you to come. And oh, by the way, free barbecue. Well, that
was the invite. That was the sealer right there, wasn't it? Free barbecue.
That sealed the deal. on a balmy Saturday afternoon in November, guys showed up at the Lockheed Martin Recreation Center, and we had barbecue, and Jim introduced himself and spoke of his desire to get the division back active, and said it was going to be, monthly meetings, which he followed up on. And through the course of those monthly meetings, and I don't know, it may have been the first one or the second one, I suggested that the division have a newsletter with the full intention of hoping somebody else would raise their hand and say, I'll do it. And that didn't quite work out. Jim called me and said, hey, that's a great idea. And he said, when can you start? And I said, well, Jim, my career at the Dallas Morning News was in overdrive, and although I had a background in journalism, I thought, this is something that maybe somebody else can speak up and take over. And he said, nobody is. I want you to do it. And so I thought about it, and I came back to him and I said, Jim, I said I've got an idea, and this goes back to several trips that I took with some local operators, going to operating sessions and car rides to Tulsa and Oklahoma City and Houston and Louisiana. And one thing I noticed, sitting in the back seat with a group of these guys, they talked about all kinds of things railroading, not just model railroading. They talked about prototype. They talked about historical, you name it. It was everything railroading. And it was kind of almost like a gossip session. And I thought, these guys really talk about this stuff, and there is a community within this. So I explained that to Jim, and I said, I've always thought that there might be an opportunity to have such a magazine. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll publish a magazine, a newsletter for the division, as long as it's my own. I don't want any money for it, any seed money or anything like that. I said, I'll do it. And he said, well, at least let me pay for the postage on the first issue. And I said, all right, you can pay for the postage. So put it out. This was our first issue. This was a whopping 6 pages printed on a copy machine, the Cowcatcher Roundup, January 2004 edition. So we mailed it to members. I sent a few to hobby shops, and folks started liking it. And I kept doing it, and it got a little bit bigger, and which meant more paper and more ink and more expense. And I had a couple of shops advertise with me. I think Angelo Hobbies was one of the first ones, and I felt like that we were going to have to get some advertising to support it. So I canvassed shops and other places, and they said, and this was no slight against the NMRA, they said, if you are a general interest hobby magazine, then we'll support you. So I eventually broke away from the NMRA. It stood alone as Cowcatcher Roundup, and 16 years later, here we are. I pulled a few issues, just what I felt like were kind of some milestone issues. We had our 100th issue, the July-August issue. And is that showing backwards when I hold this up?
Nope, it's showing right.
Okay, so it's my Zoom. Anyhow, 100th issue, we wanted to do something a little special with it, marking the anniversary, if you will, and obviously the world's turned upside down, and we felt we needed to devote pages to how folks are, modelers are coping with COVID, and we did that. So there's no sweet, sentimental tribute to the Cowcatcher. And Mike mentioned, Mike and I were talking about that, and he said, hey, why don't you come on Zoom meeting and the next division meeting and talk about some of the milestones and where the Cowcatcher has gone since it started. So here we are. One of the things that I wanted to do when I started publishing this magazine was draw on my background. I was a sports writer for several years for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and Dallas Morning News. I was living the dream as a sports writer, and then got married and realized that working nights and weekends are not good for for marriage.
But you got some good some good eats in the press room, right, at the stadiums.
I did, and I don't know if this is legend or not, but I covered the Rangers for a while when they were back in the old stadium, Turnpike Stadium, and I was told that the reason there was a ice chest full of beer up there every night in the press box was because Randy Galloway demanded
I have no doubt about that whatsoever.
I never asked about it, but every now and then I'd sneak a beer or two. But yeah, that I met a lot of interesting people, had a lot of fun. I covered mostly high school and college sports. Sadly, I was there for the last season of the UTA's football team in 1985, the year I graduated from there. There was probably a few of you out there that didn't even know they had a football team, but they did. But anyway, I wanted to apply what I went to school for and build a news-oriented magazine, something a little bit different than what the mainstream model railroad press was doing. So we have a combination of model railroading, prototype, and just, heritage, and just about anything trains. And it all goes back to those conversations on those road trips of the guys just talking about anything train. Fortunately, it was embraced by not only the model railroad community, but also the railroad community in general. I found I could get indoors at Union Pacific and BNSF, so I starting out, I do have a few people that help now, just kind of pursued that type of format, and it's done, I feel like, fairly well over the years. One of the milestone issues that we had was in March, April 2008 issue. This is when the reservation system was really coming into being for model railroad products. And this followed an article that I did on the licensing that the railroads were demanding of model makers. So this was kind of like our second big story. And I talked to a lot of manufacturers, and we kind of got inside about why they were doing what they're still currently doing today, asking for reservations before they make models. That story, that opened some eyes, and some people kind of started talking about the magazine. I wasn't ready to go cash in, all my accolades and everything at that point. We still had a long way to go. That kind of put us on the map, along with that licensing story. But we've had a lot of fun along the way. I've gotten to interview some great people. We've, Gil Freitag, Stony Creek and Western. We've done a couple of cover stories on that railroad. One of the kind of fun stories that I did, and this issue actually did pretty well back in 2011, was we featured the railroad out at Six Flags Over Texas, and had a lot of good response with that. Steele Craver, I don't know if you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys know him. He kind of helped facilitate the article and get us into that. So, we've covered a variety of things like that, including, I've been able to go to mass transit conferences and things. We did one here when it came to Dallas. The American Public Transportation Association came here, did a feature on how the North Texas regional agencies were working together to build kind of a common rail system. So we graduated from a copy machine probably about a year after we first started, and went to a what we call an offset format of paper. In 2015, when Scale Trains entered the market, they got in touch with me and wanted to do some advertising, and they had their big debut at Train Fest in November of 2015. And they wanted to do a special edition of the Cowcatcher marking that debut, which I was extremely flattered that they asked us to do that. And it was at that point we had our first gloss cover. Now, unless you went to Train Fest, you didn't get this issue, but it was extra, and we did a special cover on top of our regular cover, and it was handed out to folks at Train Fest. That was that was our first gloss cover, if you will. And it was a while before we could really put together the resources to turn to gloss. And Rapido Trains honestly helped us with that because they wanted to do a gloss center spread in the magazine. So we agreed to that. We had our first partial gloss issue in 2016. About half the pages were gloss, half the pages were regular. And that was July, August 2016. A couple issues later, November, December 2016 issue was all gloss. Everything nice and shiny. And it was at that point, now mind you, we're in, Mike, cut me off whenever you want to, but we were 12 years. No, I'm not doing my math right here. Yeah, I guess we were 12 years into publishing, and we finally arrived with gloss. My wife said, well, you're finally a magazine now. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're all gloss paper. You're not a magazine unless you have gloss paper. And I said, no, there's a lot of publication periodicals that don't have gloss paper. Now, you're just now starting to be in a magazine. So I guess at that point, and we had changed our name to the Cowcatcher, we became a magazine in 2012. So we probably haven't been around as long as I think we have been.
Yeah, but the work's been put in, Tim.
Speaking of,
you've put in the work, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's fun. And I've always said, as long as people keep reading it, and as long as I'm having fun doing it, then we'll keep doing it. And speaking of Lori and Leo, this was May, June 2017. This was their Black Bear in Bayou. Just a phenomenal layout, phenomenal people. And I know many of you have seen it. And I understand she's going to keep the railroad going. Is that correct?
That's what Lori has indicated to me. She's going to finish out her MMR. She's still going to be a part of the hobby and continue to be associated with everybody and still open the layout and carry it forward. So we're thrilled to hear that. Tim, a couple of questions I'd like to throw at you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When did you start accepting subscriptions, and how would somebody subscribe to the magazine if they wanted to have it mailed directly to them?
We started subscriptions. I'd have to go back and look. Probably a couple of years after we started. In 2000, I'm going to have to get my dates straight here, but I think in 2006 we became a regional an all Texas publication, and I think that's when I started really doing subscriptions. And we slowly expanded from all Texas to the 4-state area: Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. And then I failed to mention this, but we migrated northward, and we consumed the middle U.S. all the way up to the Canadian border up until about 2-3 years ago. And we've since branched out east and west. We've got subscribers in just about every state, and I think 4 foreign countries. But we're coast to coast, Gulf to the Canadian border. In the magazine, there are subscription forms. You can subscribe on the website, cowcatchermagazine.com. It's you probably can get a year subscription for about what you can go and get a hamburger and fries at McDonald's anymore these days, since the price of food is rising. But it's not overly expensive to subscribe.
What's your current distribution, circulation?
We're doing about 3,500 copies, and most of that is free in hobby shops. We'll work with hobby shops to handle the magazine, and they offer it as an incentive for their customers to come into their shop.
So we've got quite a few people here, and Dwayne, step up if you don't mind, that work on the AP program. What does it take to have an article published in your magazine if we wanted to submit an article that would help people get some points for their AP? and things like that. And by the way, I know Jason is over in Alabama. It's not going to be an easy way for him to pick up one at his hobby shop locally. If he wanted to find out how to get a subscription, where could he do that also?
Yeah, the website, cowcatchermagazine.com. We take PayPal or we take credit cards. So that's an easy way to do it. And we've done this before. We've had some folks going for AP that have contributed photographs or articles. I'm happy to work with folks. Just shoot me an email at cowcatcher@verizon.net. Tell me what you're working on, what you're thinking about, and I'll take a look at it. We edit, so don't get your feelings hurt if it doesn't come out exactly the way you wrote it. But we'll make sure you look good, and I'll work with you on it. I'm happy to entertain those sides.
How does that normally equate for points wise for the AP program? I thought you were able to. Let's see here.
I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
That's going to make it a regional publication. I'll have to double check the circulation numbers to get it into national, but I think as long as you're over 1,000, I think it is, it makes you regional. I know I've looked it up for writers in the past who have submitted things and said, hey, I sent some stuff to Tim Blackwell. It was in this issue. And I confirmed with national that anything that he's got right now is considered a regional publication. I'll have to double check the distribution numbers again to see at what point it bumps over to count as national points.
Cool.
But 3,500 is good numbers.
That's good, and I'm glad to hear that. A lot of folks don't realize that, first off, the reason that Cowcatcher Division is Division 1 is because this is where the Lone Star region actually started. And the Cowcatcher, I got a copy from the archives of the very first Cowcatcher newsletter that was from the region, from the division, thus the region. This whole division was started with Bobby Hall, believe it or not. She passed out a small petition in her store in Dallas. The very first meeting was held at a hotel in downtown Fort Worth that organized the division, organized the region. And that's the reason that Cowcatcher Division, based in Fort Worth, is Division 1 of the Lone Star region. And the newsletter came out, and the byline of the newsletter was "Spreading the Bull of Model Railroading Across Texas." So that's how it all came around. So, Tim, thank you so much.
I don't know.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said, I don't know. I've got one or two of those original issues. I don't know if it's the first one or not, but you're exactly right. Spreading the bull. No, I just want to say I'm happy to see, and this is a little shout out to you, Mike, that the Cowcatcher Division is going strong. I think what you guys are doing, and I know Zoom meetings are, a lot of people are getting over that right now, but I think it's outstanding that you guys are still collaborating through this pandemic and sticking together. There's a lot that you guys can offer to folks out there who want to get into this hobby. And by doing what you're doing, that's a great way to be able to reach out and show what this hobby is all about. And thanks for all the support you guys have given the magazine over the years. I'm proud to be associated with the Cowcatcher Division.
Well, thanks, Tim. It's very nice of you to say. And to let you know personally, and then for the group as well, we've made an investment in some video equipment. David Cranda sent me a message the other night that, step back over here. That's what happens whenever you get away from the camera. I call your name, Cranda. So he's got our video switcher up. We intend to continue to do Zoom meetings even after we go back to face-to-face. We're going to continue to record and add more content to our YouTube channel and continue to broadcast these meetings so that people can enjoy them even though they may not be close to us. So we're gonna keep trying to spread the word and provide. I know we've got some folks from Division 5 online with us, and Dr. Tom's sitting out there, and I know you're probably working on a model right now, Tom. Isn't that right? Just nod your head up and down if you yeah, working on an engine, no doubt. There it is, right there. Yep, that's what I thought. So we're able to help the people that are in West Texas. They have a rather much smaller division than we do, but we're able to share that. And obviously, we've talked about some of the other folks around the world that aren't serviced as well as what we have, or maybe just want to get another view on things and tie into us. So we're thrilled about it. Thanks for the shout out, and we're glad to have everybody on board. Anybody have any specific questions for Tim that he didn't answer before we? I know Tim, you said you had another commitment that you had to step away to. So if you do, just raise.
Well, hang around for a few minutes.
Video. Yeah. I'll look around the room here. Oh yeah, Dwayne.
I see Dwayne.
Just a minute. Let's see here. I don't know why I can't. Let me figure out a way to unmute everybody. I thought there was a way for me to do that. I wanted to kind of keep everybody. There we are. All right.
Keep a collar on there.
There you go, Dwayne.
Yeah. So now that you're back with the NMRA, why haven't you filled out your author paperwork?
My author.
I'm the AP guy. I have to ask.
I don't know. I guess it never occurred to me. I guess I'll have to do that.
Because you've got that in spades, man. In fact, judging from what I see of the railroad behind you, you probably have a good chunk of the rest of it too.
I would hope so after being in this for as long as I have. That's one thing that the magazine has kind of opened some doors for me it's actually helped me understand modeling better, I guess, if you will. But yeah, okay, I'll take that under advisement there, Dwayne. Thanks.
Yeah. Give me a call when you want to chat about it. Let's talk about what you've got and where you are, and maybe how far down the road you already are, and might not realize it.
Tim, didn't you just rework your in-scale layout some, or in the process?
I am. Yeah, I'm in the process thereof. I'm building a new in-scale layout that it's. I tore the old one down. It's gone. I've salvaged a few pieces from it, but I'm doing a completely new layout, much bigger. I'm in the equivalent of a 2-car garage.
Oh, nice.
Then I've got the HO shelf layout in the background.
Okay. And by the way, if you like to ask a question, I've got it figured out now to when you do this once a month, basically, it makes it difficult for you to remember where all the controls were on this, but everybody can unmute themselves now and ask a question. So I got that control set in there for you. So if you want to do that, that works.
Dwayne, I have a question here. Is there a limit on an author certificate on a regional publication? Because he could have his AP certificate just on that magazine alone.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I brought it up. There are no restrictions from a regional standpoint. The only restriction for author is that you can only get so much of it from a divisional publication or a 100% NMRA club. So yeah, no, he's got author several times over. So he just needs to fill out the paperwork and throw in a few listings in there and hand it to me. So,
hey, Mike, I got a question for Tim.
Yeah, sure, go ahead, Dick.
Hey Tim, that's a good-looking backdrop you have over your shoulder. What can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that is, it's a company out of Pennsylvania that does backdrops. Gosh, why can't I think of it?
When you come up with it, you can send me the information. I'll get it to Dick.
Okay.
Yeah. They're professional backdrops. This guy is a printer like I've been for years, has the equipment. He prints them in, I think those are like 4 or 6 foot sections. He's a little expensive, but it's good quality stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions for Tim before he bugs out? I don't see anybody else. Tim, thanks for joining us this morning. We want you to start joining us on our monthly meetings. Be here when you can. We sure would appreciate it. And thanks for stepping in this morning.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. By the way, guys, Mike Ross is trying to take roll. And if your name is anything other than your name on the bottom of your little video screen right there, he can't accurately take roll as to who you are. So if you would, please, if you can go in there, we do have them have it set up where you can go in and rename yourself. If you just click on your particular screen and click on settings, you can rename yourself to your full name so that we can get the accurate information there on there. If you guys would take care of that for me. I know that we've got several people that just have their first name or they don't even have their name at all on there. So we would appreciate it if you'd help us out with that, just so that we've got a listing of who attended the meeting. I want to go ahead and come back in before we get to Eric Lewis and his thing. Dwayne, let's talk a little bit about the AP program. What do we got coming up this time?
Mr. Ross, I have your paperwork back from National. I will get that in the mail to you here shortly. We have 2 golden spikes that were turned out well. Mr. Ross and Dennis Wright got his. Those will also be hitting the mailbox here pretty quick and heading out to you, since we can't do these things face to face. I'm hoping to get some more paperwork here in fairly quickly. There's a couple other people in D1 that have reached out that we may have some stuff coming in. I don't know any of the particulars on that just yet, but we will see. We did some judging for Jerry Schomburg, the Division I member, former president of the LSR. Jerry had us over and we judged his last piece of motive power, structures, and prototype modeler, and that finished off all 11 for Jerry. So, and not only that, he becomes the 5th member of the LSR to have all 11 certificates. But where Jerry's outdone the other 4 is Jerry also has his golden spike. And Mike and I were kind of jockeying to see which one of us was going to nail that one first, and then Jerry came out of nowhere. So, but Jerry got all 11 of his now. So that means that National will not tell me how many people have all 11. There was, in the early days, a very big kerfluffle that came along when the first guy got all of them. And somebody came up with the genius idea to refer to that as a Grand Master model railroader. Now, in the South, saying something that is a Grand Master brings up some really ugly connotations. So that got squashed really fast. I mean, it got to the point where they were making a second plaque. There was another patch that was made, all this kind of stuff. And National put the kibosh on that really fast. So because of all of that and the uproar that it created, because people threw a fit that they felt it diminished the actual master model railroader, they don't publish that information. Now, luckily enough, with Dad being the national AP guy for quite a while, I helped him build the AP database that he used when he was in office for about 11 years. And I got to see all that data. And at the time when Dad retired, the best of my knowledge, there was 17 or 18. So I would say it's probably a pretty safe bet. There's less than 24 members globally that have all 11 AP certificates, and 5 of them now reside in the state of Texas. That's not bad at all. So,
we have one of those in the Birmingham, Alabama area too.
Yeah. So it's neat to see somebody, most guys will hit their 7 and they stop. It's just, I've got there, I've crossed the finish line, I'm done. So it takes an extra little bit of oomph to try to go ahead and get all of them. I've always wanted to. I've been sitting on it now for a long time because I didn't want to throw anything in while Dad was head of the program. But so I've got 3 left to do, and I've been sitting on 2 of them now for almost a decade. So now that he's stepped down and retired, I got to get one of them fixed because it got messed up. So we'll be working on that. But I'm hoping I'll have 2 more of mine even submitted here in the next month or 2, depending on how fast I can complete the repair on my prototype modeler scene. But we did some other judging for Tom Greco. For those of you guys that don't recognize the name, he's the gentleman who sits down in the lunch area at the Plano train shows and plays guitar and sings. He's an active member in Division III, yet he lives maybe 10 minutes from or so from the meeting house where Texas Western. So he ought to be coming over to the D1 meetings. It'd be a lot shorter drive for him, but we did some judging for him.
Did you mention that to him, by the way?
I'd have. I told him, I said, you jump right on 20 and you go right out here westbound. It's just a few miles down the road as opposed to, almost an hour hike up to Allen. So we'll see. I mean,
Mr. Crumpton, that might be a heads up for you right there. Maybe reach out to Mr. Greco.
Because he's just right off of 20 there in Duncanville. So.
Well, hold on. Are we stealing members from each other now?
Of course, Speed. Where are you?
Bottom of the helix.
That's right. Same place he always is.
As always.
He spends much more time in there. He's going to put in a hot plate, a small refrigerator, and a porta potty.
I didn't say for him to leave Division III. I said join the Texas Western. There's a difference.
Yeah, he still has some things he needed to do on his prototype. He had one other model that was fairly close, but we were able to finish out his structures certifications. So he'll have another one. I think he's got 5 now, working on 6, I think. So he's coming right along. He's, by the way, looking for some dispatching hours. So if anybody knows Tom, he's got a railroad you're operating on, reach out to him and let him know you'd like to have him come over for a session or 2 and help him get his hours in. I know he'd appreciate it. So.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions regarding the AP program? Well, we got Dwayne on the hook right there. All right.
I just see one popped up in the chat. Yes, Dave, I'll get you his contact info.
Cool deal. Cool deal. By the way, Rob Cottrell, welcome from Division 5. Glad you're joining us. Thanks for stepping in. And you got to help me out here, partner. Where is Ropesville, Texas? Go ahead and unmute there. You got to unmute yourself.
I got it. Roseville is just a little bit southwest of Lubbock, about 10 miles.
Okay. So you're a suburb of Lubbock.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
And I kind of live outside of, I don't even really live in Ropes. I just live out in a little area out in the country. Good
deal. Well, glad you're here. Glad you stepped in, and it's great to have you guys joining us. You're welcome anytime, and I hope that our emails haven't intruded in your inbox too much. Just try to let you know that we're over here and want you guys to join us when you can. So thanks for being there. All right. Let's see here. I see Mr. Petrarca has joined us from Arizona. How's things in Phoenix? What's the humidity there right now, Bruce?
We're around 12%.
12% humidity with, and your temperature is what, 97 so far?
That's about right.
About 97. Okay, cool deal.
You do better than the weather people do around here.
You know, I've always said
I'm wrong.
I've always said if I have another chance to come back as something in life, I'm going to come back as a meteorologist, because they don't ever have to be right, and they don't get fired. So, you know.
Actually, It's 18% and only 90 degrees.
Okay, I missed it a little bit. All
It's
right.
really cool.
All right. By the way, Mr. Petrarca, see if you look over here, you see where it says Cowcatcher.
Mm-hmm.
That is Mr. Tim Blackwell. You guys need to hook up with each other. I'm going to tell everybody here, for those of us working on the 2023 convention, this kind of ties right into announcements. Mr. Petrarca is going to be working with our convention committee to put together and solicit articles from members in the Dallas-Fort Worth area about their layouts and what the plan is. And I don't think it's ever been done before. And Tim, you can probably weigh in on this. We have never had anybody put together, to my knowledge, before a national convention, a coordinated effort to blitz all of the publications, either electronic or published print copy, and get advertising, if you will, by doing articles for all of the publications starting 12 months in advance of the convention. And my idea is to flood all of the publications with articles and with layout tours and things like that, with the logo of see this layout at the 2023 National Convention in Dallas-Fort Worth. And if we flood it all, then every single publication is going to be running this. It's free advertising for the convention. It gets the word out. It creates more buzz. And Bruce, who has been publishing stuff for years as Mr. DCC, and working with Model Railroad Hobbyist, and he was the former owner of Lynchfield Station in Phoenix, which was one of the premier DCC locations to get things done all across the United States and around the world. Bruce is going to step in and take the role of coordinating all of those articles and everything to get them put together. Careful there, Harold, you're about to drop something. And
sorry about that.
That's all right. Harold, we don't know your last name. Please put that in there if you don't mind.
Sure, if I figure it out. I usually do this on my computer. I'm on my iPad. I will do it. My last name is Berenzweig, so yeah, I'm going to have to spell it. I think only Mike, the two Mikes know who I am. Hold on, I'll figure it out.
I think Mike's got it.
Oh.
I think Mike Ross has got it. Thank you. So anyway, Bruce is going to handle that. If you've got a layout, you're building a layout, you want to do some stuff, we want to reach out to Bruce and let those layouts be known and go from there. Tim, do you think anybody's ever coordinated an effort like that before?
No, I don't think so. I can see probably getting some play on, online publications or websites. It would be kind of hard probably to get into print magazines unless there was one coordinated article, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay, good deal. All right, more announcements. Let's see. We talked about Leo's passing. We talked about the 2023 convention. Terry must be out somewhere because he's social distancing with his mask on. I see that there. I guess that's what happens when you're walking around the Santa Fe yard, huh, Terry? You got to keep your mask on all the time there. All right. I hope he's smiling behind that mask, or this he's going to pull out a pistol and shoot us all. I'm not sure which it's going to be. Anybody else have any announcements that we have not gone over real quick?
Mike, can I insert mine in real quick?
Sure, that's great time, David. Thank you.
And this pertains to Leo and Lori. As you know, Lori's wishes were that any donations on behalf of Leo would come to the Texas Western Model Railroad Club, and we're very appreciative of that. So on our website, twmrc.org, there's a link where you can still donate. And I want to assure you that all proceeds that are donated in Leo's name, Lori Paletti will be a part of the decision making, and she will decide what it's going to be spent on, every penny of it. So wanted to assure you of that. At this point, we've got close to $750 in donations in behalf of Leo, and Lori will join us to determine how that's spent. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for those of you that have donated. If you still want to donate, the link is still there, and we'll leave it up for a while for those that might want to donate later. So just wanted to say thanks, and we have much appreciation to all of you for donating in behalf of Leo.
Good deal. Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
And by the way, it's a very, very noticeable on the very front page, the landing page, the home page of the layout. There is a link there across the top banner that says donations for Leo Paletti. And you can click on it. It actually goes to a specific page on the website where you can enter in, and you can put in credit card or PayPal or donate in those different formats. So it's a very good thing to do, and a good way to show your love for Leo and for Lori. So thank you very much. Does anybody have anything for show and tell that they're working on? Raise your hand. I'll kind of come around, talk here. Dr. Tom, show us what you're working on. Go ahead and unmute yourself there, and hang on a second. I'll unmute you. There we go.
I have a serious virus of my own. For some reason, a whole bunch of number 50s of the DNRGW have become popular during the virus. People have them. They've been waiting a long time to get them DCC'd. You can see they do not have a whole lot of room inside them. So it's a lot of fun to squeeze in a decoder.
When you get all that practice in, let me know, Tom. I got one I can send you.
This is the 6th one that I've done this year, and I've got another one sitting in a box over there.
I'll make it 8.
Well, you know where I live. Just I keep trying to move, but people keep finding me. And right before that, and this was also interesting, we had a gaggle of geese coming out.
Oh, there you go.
Now, this is a fairly rare one. It's made by PVC instead of by PBL. But the thing is, I've done 9 geese this year. And that's just, before that, I had maybe 1 a year. So this is really peculiar. The geese and the number 50s have popped up. And I always say that the only diesel that I'll work on is the DNRGW narrow gauge number 50. It's a narrow gauge.
You narrow gauge snobs, you.
Yeah,
that's right.
You are what you are. I was born one, and I've worked on it. I'll put it that way.
There you go. There you
anyway.
go. Thanks, Tom.
You bet.
Anybody else? Jason, tell us about your little, hang on a second. I'll get you, you're unmuted. There you go. Tell us about your circus train find.
About the 3D print things?
Your circus wagons.
Oh yeah, I found a. I don't have the website right off the top of my head, but there is a for some of us that are somewhat interested in circus and carnival modeling. You know, having to round up all those little Walthers cast resin things that are running about $15 to $20 or something on each on eBay. Ran across a guy who was selling STL files that has about 50 some odd, or I can't remember. It's a variety of wagons that you could get, and I think it was like it was about $50, and I think it had about 30 some odd wagons in it, I believe.
That's not bad.
I think so. I mean, basically, and you could print more than one. I think most of them were based upon Ringling Brothers, but I would suspect most of them could be used for carnival duty as well. So if it would probably be a much more economical, alternative. I mean, you probably print 2 or 3 of those, and you already got saving money over the Walthers ones.
Okay. Dick Brannon, Tim just texted me. The name of the company that does those backdrops is Trackside Scenery. So you can follow up on there. Dick is in the process of putting his layout together. Tim, what you got?
All right. In the spirit of show and tell, the neighbor's kid has a 3D printer, so I enlisted him to build some highway piers for me for my in-scale layout. I'm going to have a large highway going across the city.
Sure.
It's neat what you do with 3D printing. I know, Mike, you have your deal going and everything, but I'm going to have 24 of these elevating the highway, and drew up some plans, and he finalized them and printed them. This isn't painted yet, but I just thought that was cool. Thought I'd share.
Thank you. And here's the other thing, Tim. Dwayne and I have been practicing with turning the prints upside down and printing them upside down rather than right side up. And it changes the way the rafting is and the supporting, so it eases your cleanup. So if that particular, can you hold your part back up again? Rather than print it, is it flat on both sides?
Mm-hmm.
On the side of it. Yeah, no, I'll turn it the other way. The flat ways like that. There you go. If you laid it on the bed that way and printed it straight up, there would be no support.
Huh. Okay.
Okay. If you tried to print it the way it would normally stand, you can't print in midair. So the part that comes away from it like this is going to have support underneath it. If you flipped it upside down and printed it, then there wouldn't be any support either as well. So it's all about the way you support it, and the way you turn it on the bed is to print it so it eases the cleanup. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I think they printed it just like this.
Right.
Or this was laying down on the bed.
There you go. Yeah.
So he ran out of
Mike,
white filament.
Yep. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Somebody, was that you, Jason?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I just looked up that what I found. That is, if anybody's interested on those circus wagons, that's First Person Scale Models is the name of that outfit. And it does say it's over 30 unique prototypical circus wagons to completely fill your empty flat cars instead of finding the Walters wagons strewn across eBay. Yeah.
Hey,
it was based off of scale drawings that were on the Hotel Circus blog spot. Yeah.
Okay. Do me a favor. Get in touch with Whit and tell him that if he wants to come on next month and talk about some of the stuff that he's selling, some of his stuff out of his little business that he's got there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about? What's the name of the stuff that he sells? Wayne, you and I have talked about it before, and you knew about some of the stuff that he's doing, but I can't remember the name.
Lives over near us. You talking about?
Yeah, Whit.
I know he has an eBay. He has an eBay store, but I don't know. I haven't been looking on there to see if he's been selling any of it.
Anyway, reach out to him and let him know, and we'll talk about it next month, and he can talk about some of the stuff that he's got that he's doing. So,
will do.
All right. Anybody else have anything for show and tell? All right. How about tips and tricks? I've got one that I was going to share with you guys, and I can't find it now. It was here on my desk. This past week, a friend of mine, Pat McCarthy, came over from Jackson, Mississippi, and when he did, we were doing some track work. There was a couple of places where the track was a little rough, and he used a tip on something or a trick on something that I had never seen before, but it makes absolute sense. He said, where's your whetstone? I said, I beg your pardon? He goes, I know you've got one. He goes, you're an Eagle Scout. Where's your whetstone? And I said, it's right here. And I pulled it out of my desk and handed it to him. And he immediately took over this Arkansas soft whetstone and started rubbing it across the top of the rail to take off any burrs and rail. And it makes perfect sense because a whetstone just files down a knife and makes it sharper, gets rid of those burrs and things like that. But I had never heard of anybody using a whetstone on rail before to polish it out. One of the things that Dwayne and I were talking about the other day is how we cringe every time somebody brings out a Bright Boy and starts rubbing that rough, hard texture over the top of the rail. The reason why is because it always pits the rail, and you're going to leave marks in the rail which will naturally attract and hold grime, grit, oil, whatever, and cause a problem with your connection. So if you're going to really do something to clean the rail, do it with very, very, very fine grit sandpaper, or use a polishing stone, just like what Pat used. Okay. And I just got a text here that PBL, that does a lot of stuff for SN3 stuff. They sell an extremely fine stone for track polishing the rail. Thanks, Mike. And so what I've got is an Arkansas stone. I got it laying over here somewhere. Oh, there it is right there. Hang on a second. I see it.
All right, while he's digging that out, I'll throw one in. As a guitar builder, I have what they call a leveling beam, and you use it for leveling frets when you're working on a guitar. And all it is a aluminum rectangle that's varying lengths, and you put self-adhesive sandpaper on it. Now, if you go over to probably Home Depot, Lowe's will have them, even Harbor Freight has them, you'll actually find like a 2-foot bubble level that has a machined edge on one side of it. You can actually take that and glue your sandpaper use your self-adhesive sandpaper and put that on that machined surface. And you can use that if you're hand laying track, you can use that to sand back and forth and level your ties out. If you're using flex track, you can use it. If you're using Homasote has a very irregular surface, which is another reason why a lot of us here in the area have switched over to Mycore, because Mycore is very consistent. But if you're using Homasote, you guys know sanding that stuff and trying to level it out is a real nightmare. But if you put this on that 2-foot level, you start working out, and what'll happen is you'll actually sand down the high points. It's like using a hand plane when you were in shop class. The longer the plane you want for smoothing out a surface. Now, once you level it out, then once you smooth it out, then you can go to smaller and smaller units. The same thing works with this. If you get a long 2-foot plane and put a little bit of sandpaper on it, you can level out your track spot where all your rail's going to go, and everything then stays nice and flat, and you don't end up with a lot of this going on. This is okay. This is a problem. So thought I'd throw that one out there.
Very good. Thanks, Dwayne. Here's a picture of that. Let's see here. This is a picture of that Arkansas stone that I used to start polishing the rail out. And just on a personal note, we got a lot of stuff done. The railroad is completely hot on the east side of my train room. All the track is working. The road has been restocked, and this is another little tip or trick, if you don't mind, let me share in that, is that when I decided I was going to put the railroad back in service, and obviously wanted to do that as soon as possible, the main thing I wanted to do was do it right this time. And in my haste previously, I would be so excited about having a railroad that I could run again that I would just throw anything on the railroad and get it going and start running cars and doing all that kind of stuff. However, this time I held myself back, and before I put any single car or any single engine on the track, I inspected it. I made sure it had either KD or steel wheels, metal wheels on the car. I checked the couplers. I cleaned the wheels. I cleaned the wheels on the locomotives before I put anything on there. I also cleaned the track. So now, starting fresh, I have no cross-contamination of anything. Everything was clean when it went on there, and that makes it a whole lot easier to keep it clean and make everything run a whole lot better. So a word to the wise, if you can do it, go ahead and take everything off, clean all your rail, clean all your wheels, clean your locomotives, and get everything going as well as you can. Anybody else have any tips and tricks before we move on? Yes, sir. Tom, go ahead.
What you were talking about is called Cratex. It's a gray block.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And some people just like, hey, don't tell anybody, but this is a bright boy. Haven't used it lately. I haven't sinned lately. It's quite rough, but some people simply like cleaning their track that way. They're used to it. So what I was going to suggest, picking up where you did, is Cratex comes in about 3 or 4 different grits. This is the finest one. According to them, I can't even feel the grit. Exactly. I know it's fine. It's finer than 2000 grit because, and if you rub the rail with it, you won't see any scratches. It doesn't take off much either. So I'm not encouraging people to use a block, but I'm saying if you like to use a block, see if you can't find one of these. I can't remember if I saw it at Walters. That may be what you're talking about at PBL. I don't know, but it is Cratex. And it's an incredibly fine gray stone. It's not a stone, it's flexible. But it's like using a bright boy. So.
Yep. Thanks, Tom. Also, guys, if you're not, go to the bottom of your video section there where you can see all of the different people that are talking. At the top, you can see a speaker view, or you can look at the view that's got everybody's picture in there. If you go to the very bottom of that, you can see there's a area that you can hover over that lets you look at the chat. There's some information going on in the chat area. Don Hummel just said, don't be afraid to use metal polish on your rail. So that's a good thing. Thanks for that, Don. You can also see that Speed put a link in there for first-person scale models. So that you wanted to find out about the stuff that Jason was talking about, you can do that as well. The chat area on our meetings is a good place to have a little quick, sentence about this, that, and the other. You can tie in there and put different things in there as well. So that works out really good. Thanks for that. Moving on to Q&A. Anybody have anything that they want to ask about? Questions and answers, anything like that? I see Mike.
Question.
Hang on a second here, just a second. I see Mike Walters got somebody sneaking in there on the back side of him. Hello, Doc. How are you? Good to see you. Okay, sir. Mr. iPad, we still don't know your name over there. I haven't got you over there yet because we're trying to figure out who you are.
Mike Baker. Baker. Yeah, my question is, I've got an N-scale Baker. Yeah, I've got an N-scale layout set in 1933, so I've got a lot of microscale wooden cars, and I'd like to weather them, but all the articles I read or YouTube channels are all about doing rust, and I know there'd be some rust on a wooden car, but I need a source. Where could I go to find out how to weather a wooden car?
So good question. A couple of things that I would do is, first off, historical photographs. That's a good thing to do. But also, I would use the, Dwayne, you got your pencils handy?
I've got it. Yeah, AK Interactive makes the weathering pencil set.
AK Interactive.
Any of the weathering powders for Bragdon or Dr. Brown's. I don't have my pencils here. Yeah, there's also a lot of good videos out there. Depending on, a lot of it depends on how weathered you want the car to look, okay? a lot of the narrow gauge guys, and one of the things that a lot of us gravitate to that side of the hobby is because it does require a lot of scratch building, and it does require a lot of weathering and things. So just about any of the narrow gauge publications can have some really good images for you to work through. There's looks like Speed just sent everybody a link to Amazon where you can get the weathering pencils.
Thanks, Speed. You're really good at that, Speed. Thanks.
All my prototype photos are black and white is one of my problems.
Yeah, finding pictures that far back can be real challenging, and but again, that's why I was going to say go to the narrow gauge type stuff, because there's quite a bit of that still out there running around. And the last few years of the narrow gauge, there was quite a bit of that done in color. So there is quite a bit of data out there. There are several large photo collections, but the bulk of those are in black and white. But if you just go out to Yahoo, I know like people tend to like Google more than Yahoo. I don't know. It's a preference thing. It doesn't really matter that much. But to me, Google's kind of like the old generic aisle when I was a kid. You know, just a white can with black letters that said green beans. It's kind of what Google's interface is. But the reason I like Yahoo better than Google for image searches is it will let you do a couple of things with the image right there in the search screen, including save it. In Google, you end up having, if you try to go to the site to get it, if you click on it in Yahoo, it takes you straight to that image. In Google, you click on it and it takes you to the web page, and then you get to try to figure out where that image is. So if you go out to Yahoo, do a search through their image library and look for wooden freight cars, that kind of thing, it'll pull you up a really good collection that you can look at and find some different types of inspiration. But
another thing, we're next month. We've got a gentleman coming on who is doing a clinic on how to make plastic look like wood. And if you've never sat in on that clinic before, it's absolutely amazing. I'm having a brain cramp. Dwayne, help me out.
Bob Brendel.
Bob Brendel, thank you.
Yeah.
I just had a cramp with between the ears. Bob Brendel is doing a shut up, Dwayne. Is doing a clinic on how to make plastic look like wood, and it is absolutely amazing what he can do. I was over at his house several months back, and if you've ever seen the little chicken coop in HO that Atlas made, that was part of their little series that they had of those trackside structures you could buy and put out there on your side of your layout. And it's a cheesy looking little chicken coop. And I'm standing here and I'm a foot away from it. And he goes, yeah, I'm working on my little chicken coop there. And I literally thought it was wood. And it's the plastic Atlas chicken coop that you buy for, 10 cents or 25 cents at the train shows all the time. But he had it looking like absolute wood. So, Mr. Baker, there, if you want to make sure you can make those plastic cars look like wooden cars, that's a clinic you do not want to miss next month. So, Bob Brendel's clinic is going to be fantastic. Anything else for Q&A? Anybody? All right. Well, guys, the final thing, Speed, can you talk to us about NMRA X, what's going on real quick?
So what's coming up?
Yes, sir.
Is the board of directors is willing to talk to us for 2 hours on August the 22nd. I believe it's 3 o'clock Eastern time, so 2 o'clock our time. Then Ask the MMR with a whole new set of MMRs is on September 12th. And then September 26th, we will do 12 clinics again from, I believe it's 10 o'clock our time till 10 o'clock at night.
All right. Is there a website that we can go to where that's posted yet?
If you go to the nmra.org website and you click on calendar, you will have all the NMRA X events coming up. And when you click on an event, it will also have the links for the YouTube and Facebook places you need to go to watch them.
And guys, if you haven't attended those or gone and looked at the archives of all of the videos and all of the content that has been assembled since April, you're doing yourself a sore injustice, because there is tons of great information out there. Layout tours, talks about everything. Mike Ross has done stuff. He's done things on how to make trees. Dwayne's done clinics. Speed's done clinics. Bruce Petrarca's done clinics. A whole host of people from North Texas. They've even asked me to put in some stuff there from time to time. So I'm very fortunate to be a participant in that. And so I truly urge you to step out there and take a look at what's available. I think Jim Ogden even had a clinic that you did for him. Didn't that right, Jim? Didn't you? I thought you did. Yeah. So I just don't want to.
Palmer's done a couple too.
Yeah. Who's that?
Jeff Palmer's done a couple
too. Jeff Palmer. That's right. Yep. By the way, we send our get well wishes to Mr. Palmer. He's a little under the weather with an eye issue right now, but we're hoping that he has speedy recovery, Jeff. So good luck with that.
Mike Walters' clinic on soldering.
Yep, that's right. Mike Walters' clinic on soldering. Thanks. Yeah, I just don't want to miss anybody on that. So that's the reason I'm just kind of taking roll on there. Thanks, Mike, for reminding me.
Mike Corley.
Yeah, Mr. Corley did a clinic. I thought he was going to be with us today, but apparently something's come up. All right, without further ado, I want to introduce our main clinician for today. The gentleman is a model railroader, but most importantly, and I guess he earns his money by being a prototype railroader. And he is in charge of working on signaling and working with third-party, and I'm going to let him actually describe exactly his job description here in just a minute. But Eric Lewis, I see you wearing your Aggie shirt today. Congratulations. I'm glad you're supporting the maroon and white there, much to the chagrin of Mr. Kirkpatrick. Make sure that everybody knows that the Ags are back and practicing and getting ready for a football season. But Eric Lewis works for Union Pacific, and he is based in Spring, Texas, and he is going to be talking to us about signaling and prototypes and everything else and all that kind of stuff. So, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for your hard work. You'll see it exactly how much work he's put in when you see his PowerPoint demonstration. So, Eric, it's all yours. Thank you.
All right, everybody hear me all right? All right. Let me share my screen. Mike, can you let me share my screen so I can get
I sure can. Hang on a second. Let's see here. Let me get here. Okay, you should be able to share now. Yes?
All right, everybody see this here?
There we go. Good job.
All right, so yes, as Mike said, I work for Union Pacific Railroad. I'm in a group that's called the Industry and Public Projects. What we do is the feds dole out money to the railroads every year for crossing signal upgrades and expansions. We manage those projects for the state agencies that get that money. We also work with local agencies on quiet zones, new road crossings, the closure of road crossings. We also do manage the projects for bridges going underneath and over us. We also work with entities like DART, TexRail, and the TRE as it impacts us. We work closely with Amtrak where they have stations on our tracks for station expansions and rehabs. And we also work with capacity projects internally. And we also do a lot of big high-level projects like the I-45 realignment out of downtown Houston. That's one of our bigger ones. I'm also working with Texas High-Speed Rail. Quick little disclaimer that the company requires me to do when I do these, since they're non-official. I'm not here as a representative of Union Pacific, despite the fact that I do work for Union Pacific. And there are certain things I will not be able to share due to proprietary reasons. So just getting that out of the way. What I'm going to go over today is just how our CTC system works, or just the basics, nothing real detailed about CTC, TWC, and then crossing signal operations. This is my familiarity with it as a Union Pacific employee. Some of it's going to be pretty standard across the board, specifically the crossing signal operations, CTC, TWC, and all that may be different from railroad to railroad. If at any time you do have questions about something, just tell me to stop, and I will try to do my best to answer those. Again, I may not be able to answer everyone for legal reasons. So has anybody got anything before I start?
Eric, the only thing I would ask is that you identify what you're saying. When you say CTC or WTC, just make sure you break it down to the lowest common denominator so that everybody's familiar with what those terms, those letters stand for.
All right. Well, as luck would have it, I've got a glossary of terms. So, CTC, or these are CTC is centralized command control or centralized traffic control. It's a form of dispatching a railroad. It's all done via computer. Union Pacific has 4 dispatching locations. Our primary one is the Harriman in Omaha. We do have one in Fort Worth where we're actually in the BNSF dispatching center, and that's primarily our Powder River coal operations where we dispatch. We do have one in LA Basin for the LA terminal, and then we have one actually here in Spring, Texas, where we have KCS and BNSF desks as well, due to the complexity of the Gulf Coast terminals, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Houston. We have everybody in-house in this building since everybody operates within each other here. TWC is just track warrant control. And there's 2 different versions of that, and we'll go into that on these other slides. A few terms that you'll hear me reference throughout the presentation: a control point, or a CP. It's an identifier for a defined geographical point along the railroad that is controlled by a dispatcher or tower operator. It's located wherever train management has a requirement to control the operation of trains via signals and switches. They're generally defined in a timetable or a general order specific location, and they're used within a computer-aided dispatching system, or CAD, for tracking the location of a train and that particular switch. And a control point consists of various signal and engineering service equipment. Sorry. An OS or on switch. It's another term used for a control point, but that's more specific to the CAD reporting events and how the CAD operates it. A diamond, everybody's familiar with that. You'll hear me refer to it as an interlocker. That's a UP term, but that's what we call a diamond, what we refer to as a diamond. It's where 2 at-grade railroads, rail lines cross each other, either at a 90 or obliquely, obtuse, acutely, whatever. And again, I've got pictures of it's one of our examples here in Houston. Crossover, or an MLXO, 2 turnouts in which the track between the frogs, and the frog is where the train actually transitions from one set of tracks to the other. And I'll point that out for those that don't know. Is arranged to form a continuous passage between 2 nearby and generally parallel tracks. So you can transfer from main 1 to main 2. And that's called crossing over. Preemption. That's going to come into play with our grade crossing systems. It's basically a special control mode in a roadway traffic signal controller designed to start up and clear any vehicular traffic on our crossing prior to the approach of a train. And I'll go into how that basic operation works. Advanced preemption is just another version of that. It just looks out a little further down the track and gets the system cycling a little sooner. And then a DTMF switch is a power switch, but it's pre-programmed dual tone multi-frequency. That's what DTMF stands for. And it's generated from a VHF radio handset. So maintenance away employees or train crews specifically, they tone up on the radio like they tone up a dispatcher, and that's what controls this switch. They can open and close it via radio, so they don't have to get out and hand throw it. These are primarily seen yard leads and dark territory or track warrant territory to add the validity of service on that line. Are there any questions about those terms? Okay. One thing a lot of people don't know about, this is something that we do as far as education with our public agencies and other people. There's a system that the FRA has in place called the Emergency Notification System. And what it is, it's this blue sign here you see off to the right. Every railroad crossing, whether it's public or private, on any railroad, doesn't matter if it's class 1, short line, excursion, tourist, whatever, is required to have one of these signs at the railroad crossing. And what it does is it provides the phone number for whoever the railroad that owns that line is. It gets you a number to the signal operations, or the what we refer to as our RMCC desk. You dial that number and you give them what's called the DOT number, which is that 6-digit number with a letter. Every crossing has a unique number and letter designation called the DOT number. So if you have any issues at a crossing, and I'll go over the way that you can use this, this is what you look for, and you call this number. You get a direct line to somebody, and if it's an emergency, they will put you on hold, contact dispatch, and start shutting things down based on the location you give them with that DOT number. You can use it for vehicle on tracks for a VOT incident, where like a car gets disabled on the track or somehow ends up turning down the track, or there's a collision on the crossing. If there's a accident adjacent to the crossing and you have vehicles stopped on the track because they can't go anywhere, or emergency personnel are parking too close to the track, you use this sign. If the crossing train, you use this. It's a signal issue or possible broke rail. They call maintainer and he comes out and fixes it. Or if you have pumping, meaning you're pulling up to it, the gates drop, nothing's happening, then they go up, then they come back down, and you can verify that there's no train present, you call this number again. If you do, you can use it to report loose loads or dragging equipment, journal boxes, any of that. If you do, you need to be able to provide the lead engine number of the train if possible, so that they can figure out where this train is at on the CAD, or if it's TWC, they can contact the dispatcher, give them the train number, they can contact them directly. And you can use this information to get that train stopped, or at least do a walk-in inspect. Any questions on these, or the uses rather? These are just some examples of placement of where you'll see the blue signs. On gates, that's our typical orientation on our gates. And cants, if you have a cantilever signal, it'll be on the mast in a similar orientation. Public and private crossings that have wood posts like this, it will be down below the main sign on the post here facing out to the roadway. BNSF actually has theirs flipped to where they're facing the direction of travel. FRA didn't dictate actual placement. It just had to be within eyesight of vehicles and pedestrians. And then the railroads, each railroad kind of took their own liberty with how they defined that rule. Another thing on crossings, I don't know if anybody's familiar with what's called a power light at an active grade crossing. I was not fully awake and didn't have enough coffee, so I took a picture of the wrong side of the cabin here. I apologize. On the cabin side facing the tracks, where the doorway into the cabin, you're going to have 1 or 2 lights above the doorway. One of those is the power light. If it is strobing, that means there's an issue internally within the cabin or the signal system itself. Generally means it's not going to have, what it basically means is it doesn't have direct power and it's running off the battery bank inside the crossing. Power outages, high temperatures, lightning strikes, any of these things can cause these problems to occur. The battery bank only has a limited amount of supply, and once it runs out without being addressed, then the crossing will not work as intended. It will not drop on the approach of a train. So if you see one and you have the time, this is another type of ENS sign that all of our public active warning device grade crossings has. It's all the same information. It just provides the street name and the milepost generally of the crossing. Call that number, call in the power light. They'll slow order trains through there until the maintainer can come out and get the situation fixed and operating as intended. So, all right, CTC. So CTCs is a system of operation by means of which the movements of trains over routes and through blocks on a designated section of track or tracks is directed by signals and controlled from a designated point without requiring the use of train orders, which we also call bulletins, and without superiority of trains, lineups. Dispatcher's control board displays track and signal status and train location for the portion of the railroad that is under the CTC control. Has remote control switches, which are your CPs and your OSs, your interlockers, with which dispatch can change signal indication and track switch position out on the line. We'll come back to that. I'm going to move something over to this screen. Hopefully y'all can see it. All right. Trying to zoom out. Can y'all see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. So this is the CAD. This is our current CAD system. What you're looking at, this is Valley Junction, Texas. I'm sure several people are familiar with this location if you're from the Texas area.
That's live too, isn't it, Eric?
What's that?
Is this live?
This is live. This is absolutely live. And then down here this is Old Town Spring here. And this is Belt Junction. This is where the Palestine sub, the Houston West Belt, the Houston East Belt, and BNSF's Houston sub all come together coming into the Houston terminal on this side of town.
Where's the speedway down the middle of Hardy Toll Road?
This right here, this section right here. So this piece right here, once you get south of H220, which is our control point there, Hardy Toll Road splits, and all of these tracks are in between Hardy Toll Road's north and southbound lanes. But this is what a standard CAD system for CTC on our side looks like. We actually have a new version coming out that we're rolling out in phases over the next 18 months. So this will look completely different. Here, this is what track warrant or dark territory looks like on CAD as it comes into CTC. You don't have visibility of the entire line. You just have visibility of the approach into CTC. So dispatch can properly line signals and switches in advance of that train. Once it leaves this block, it's gone. They don't have visibility of it again until it hits another CTC point or they release their warrant to the dispatcher. But that's what you're looking at right here.
Eric, if they put, is the rabbit line, which goes from Houston up to Shreveport, is it still dark or have they made it?
No, the Lufkin sub is now 100% CTC.
Okay.
Well, I take it back. Maybe I think in Shreveport, it's either yard limits or dark to start. But once you get south of town, it goes CTC all the way here into Houston.
Okay.
So, but yeah, this is the bottom end of the Lufkin right here.
Okay.
And then the arrows that you see here, what they show is what direction that track is lined out for. So it's lined green going east. This line's lined green going west. Red is where the train is currently present.
That's what I was going to ask next. Can you describe what those letters mean?
So these are the trains that are out there. G is typically a grain train. The way our system works is you do the letter defining the type of commodity or load, and then the first 2 to 3 letters are the origin point, and then the remaining letters are the destination. Grain trains are typically the hardest to figure out where they're coming from because it depends on what silo they're coming from. We don't have too many dedicated shuttle trains to specific locations. It's as the silo's ready to ship, we create a location. This one is actually coming up from Mexico. Not sure where it's heading. This is an auto rack out of Spring heading to Laredo. Then you have the MFW-EW, which is a manifest from Fort Worth heading into Inglewood. If it's purple, it's got a track block. There's not even a crew on there right now. It's waiting for a recrew to head into the terminal. And these here are what we call, these are track tags, slow orders. So somebody just put out a 25 mph, and this gives you the information. of what the speed is and the mile pole range of that, when it was issued, what track it was on, who issued it. This number gets directly pushed. This is the track tag, the PTT. Now with PTC, they don't even have to talk to the train crew to give them these anymore. As long as their PTC is active, they shove it straight to the train's computer system via PTC, and it shows up. And then anything in orange, MAGNL, this is from Angleton going to North Little Rock. It's doing a pickup at Lloyd Yard here in Spring. Anything with an orange shows a approaching termination point. Basically, the crew's out of hours or it's about to hit its terminal. So this crew will crew change here on the number 2 main in Spring once they're done doing their set out, or their pickup rather.
So Eric, typically railroads are east-west or north-south, right?
It depends. A BNSF runs primarily on an east-west orientation. That's how their stuff is set. Union Pacific did it a little different with all the mergers and acquisitions because of how those railroads were done. So our timetable dictates east, west, north, and south. We do have some subs that actually run more predominantly east and west, but they do have a north-south trajectory, so we call those north-south routes. It's just depending on what the timetable says.
So the train that you showed us a minute ago that was the Fort Worth to Inglewood Yard train, where is that one?
This is on, say that again.
So it looks as though that train is, if it's, which way is Fort Worth from here?
So this train, I'll give you the route that this train came.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the Palestine sub. This is the bottom end. The Palestine sub is a north-south route. Bottom end is at Belt Junction at milepost 228.9. Milepost 0 is in Longview. This train's route coming out of Fort Worth was, if I can get up there. So it came out of, so I lose sight. So this is West Texas here. This is a Fort Worth sub. So it came out of Fort Worth direct all the way down the Fort Worth sub. Came straight through Valley Junction here. And so here at Valley Junction, you have the Fort Worth sub. This is what starts the Navasota sub. This is the Austin sub. And then this is the beginning of the Hearn sub. This is the Ennis sub, Giddings sub, and Bryan sub, all right here. And these are just the connecting routes between all the tracks. Eventually, Valley will be double tracked through here. So it came through Valley, came down the Navasota, crossed over the Giddings here, and came down the Navasota all the way through Bryan, College Station, Navasota, and made the turn into Old Town Spring at milepost 0 onto the Palestine sub right here. And then it either went 1 or 2. More than likely, it came down the number 1. On the Palestine sub and most double track mains, you have dedicated flow of traffic. So on the Palestine, number 1 is primarily southbound, which is this line here. And number 2 is primarily northbound.
So when the presidential funeral train left Spring and went up the Navasota sub to Bryan College Station, it went the opposite way on number 2. Is that correct?
No, it came out at Westfield. We have an auto facility that we serve right here, just south of this crossover. That's where he was loaded, and that's where the train was staged. So they came right out on the number 1 and came up the Navasota.
Okay.
And again, but that's because that's where we loaded them. Again, it's primarily, we will run them whichever direction we need to due to traffic constraints, but that's the primary thing. But obviously on that particular day, all tracks were clear, so they could run it however they wanted.
There wasn't a train within 25 miles of that day. Whenever.
Yeah, there was one train that ran ahead of it that nobody talked about. Very few people knew about it. It was the sweeper train. It ran ahead to, just in case there were any track issues, that train was going to be the one to find it before his train went. That one left earlier that morning. That was the only train running that route that day, in addition to the funeral train.
Interesting. All right. Well, this has been great. Let's get you back on track with your PowerPoint.
Okay. So there's different types of signals in CTC. You have what's called an absolute signal. That's going to be at your control points. It looks just like an intermediate or a block signal, but it's specific to that control point, and it is dictated by the dispatcher. The signal aspects there are dictated by the dispatcher, and it will not have any kind of a mile marker indication or anything, any kind of signage on the masts. Whether it's a cant, just a single post, it won't be on there. And at an OS with an absolute signal, I'm sure some of you that have scanners have heard this. You've heard of flagging through a CP. Basically means the dispatcher, for whatever reason, cannot change the signal aspect from the most restrictive signal to a clear. So what they have to do is the dispatcher has to have the conversation below in this next line here with the train crew to proceed past that red signal to go into the OS. The way they work is if you have to manually line the switch because the dispatcher can't do it at these locations, if the system's not working right, the conductor gets out, goes to the switch after getting permission, takes it off of power, puts it on hand, lines it manually. Then the train comes into the switch. Once the first set of trucks are in the switch, the train stops. The conductor then lines it back on power, and then the switch will stay in that position until the train clears, and then it will line back to its original route of main to main or whatever its normal position is once the train is clear. That's how you flag from one main to the other, or from main to a siding. If it's just a main to main move, you just get permission and you go. But that's what flagging at a CP or an OS is at an absolute signal. You don't have to do that at intermediates. You just do it at absolutes. And these are some examples. This is down here at Belt Junction. So the Palestine starts right up, actually right here. So this is the West Belt connector. This is the East Belt connector. And these are the absolute signals that govern all the tracks coming together right here going into Palestine. And this is just a side view of all of them. And this is actually one set. This is one control point. This is another one. The control points are stacked here. So this is 829. This is 828.
Eric, can you briefly give us the signal aspects? Because you've got reds, greens. Do they still use lunars and flashing and stuff like that?
Lunars, they do exist. Generally, they're for if a switch is lined for you to go into a terminal, or you're going to do a set out move. Like Valley Junction siding has lunar aspect. The entrances into Lloyd Yard has lunar aspects. But on mainline routes such as this, generally lunar aspects aren't existent anymore. It's something we phased out on our lines.
So for those of you who are not familiar, obviously you've seen a red signal. You've seen a green signal when a train's coming. You've possibly seen a yellow signal. A lunar signal is basically a white signal. That's the reason it's called lunar, like the moon. And then you've got flashing signals. So can you talk about the importance of different ones of those, Eric?
On our railroad, we have a flashing red, which is the most restrictive, meaning it's, you can't proceed and you can't even flag because you're probably looking at the back end of a train right in front of you. That's what a red signal, how that works on our territory. Then you have this solid red, which is restricted. You have flashing yellow, which is an advanced approach, which means you're about to come up to an approach yellow, which is a solid yellow, which will then be followed by a red signal indication. And that's really the only flashing indications we have. I've never seen a green flashing. Some railroads do have it. We don't have that as a function of our wayside system. And on these signals, I know you've seen them on BNSF. They do full 3-color when you have an approach to a switch, unless it's a mainline crossover and if it's just a siding. We just have a yellow and a red aspect indicator here. That's it. BNSF will have green, yellow, and red. And that's basically just a diverging approach signal on our railroad is what that is. Lets you know this will be green, but then this will also tell you you're going into a siding and what the signal on the other end of the siding will be as you enter, and that dictates your speed coming in.
Excellent, thank you.
These are examples of intermediate block signals. Everybody's familiar with those, I'm sure, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on those, but you can see it's got the number board here. And what that does, it's not that, it's typically the milepole where those signals are. It's not exact, but it's a close indication of where those signals are in relation to what milepole on the rail line. And these can either be approach lit, which means on the dispatching screen, it'll show green all the way through, but these won't even be lit until the train enters the block behind it, and then they will start to light. Some subdivisions, the dispatcher lights them up manually, or when they stack trains and light up on their screen, then these start to light in advance of the train. It just depends on how the subdivision's wayside system is set up. We don't actually have a particular standard on that just yet. Departure signals. These are little signals, are typically red and yellow aspects, so they're just two lanes. They're generally on an industry or a non-controlled track in advance of the switch, allowing the train to actually enter the main line in CTC territory. Default aspect is going to be red. And then depending on how the system is set up at that location, when the train's ready to enter, the dispatcher will put out a track block, similar to track and time for maintenance away, but it's actually a block where they can't accidentally line signals. Trains can't come in on approach lit. So it dominoes the signals out away to show restricted, so this train can come out unencumbered onto the main line. And
basically a dwarf signal that we would call it, right?
No, not always. Dwarf signals, we generally, on our side, dwarf signals are reserved for CPs. We don't really use them. They're on a single mast. They're just not as tall as an intermediate or an absolute signal. They're a little shorter. But our dwarf signals are typically going to be at our control points where we have dimension restraints.
Got it.
When the block is set, crews are given permission to enter, and the signal indication will either turn yellow upon that, or when the derail is lined for the train to come out, or when they step on what's called a step-on circuit as the train moves up to the switch. If there is a train already lined into the main and that crew's waiting to come out, the signal stays on a red indication, and the train is required to contact the dispatcher by radio to verify that they've identified the rear of that train before they can come out. So that's the only really time we still use lineups, is in a situation like that. And then a hold and distance signal is a pretty unique thing that railroads have. It's a signal linked to an absolute signal, or at a control point further on down the line. They're used to hold a train short or within a certain portion of a block or segment. It reflects what is on the CP that is not in view of the train crew. And what this, an example of this is on the Dallas Submain outside of Grand Prairie. You have 19th Street crossover right there before you get to the GM plant. If we brought trains up to that signal to hold, you basically cut the entire city of Grand Prairie in half. So there's a separate extra signal that's not considered a block or intermediate further on down on the east side of Grand Prairie that crews will actually hold at as if it is a control point or an absolute signal. Once the dispatcher is ready to run them through 19th Street, when he activates and changes the signal aspect at 19th Street, that hold signal changes at the same time and will mirror what's at 19th Street, and then the train can come through without cutting Grand Prairie in half. And again, interlockers are the same thing as a diamond. There's various types. An automatic interlocker is not independently controlled by a dispatcher or control operator. It's train approach lit, and the train presently in the approach has the right of way. So basically the block leading up to the interlocker, if there's a train in one of those blocks, whoever was there first has the right of way. When that train clears, then the train on the conflicting route gets a clear signal to proceed into their block and approach the interlocker. If a train on a conflicting route has a red signal aspect, or it drops in front of them and it doesn't change back to a clear, which is a green, they can either switch to the conflicting route's radio channel and attempt to reach the other train, or contact the dispatcher to verify whether there is in fact a train in that interlocker. If it's confirmed that there is no train present, the crew may bring their train to the signal and do what's called work the box. Automatic interlockers have a key release for both train crews and maintenance of way. This box essentially allows the crew to clear the signals and provide the proper signal indication for their train. Again, assuming there's not a train on approach or presently at the interlocker. Once they get a favorable indication, the engineer brings the train inside the interlocker, stops, conductor removes their key from the box, and the train may proceed. And generally, the system resets itself after that. If it continues to happen, they call signal maintainers out, and they come out and work on the issue to get it working as intended. Then you have a manual interlocker. We say basically you have to talk to the man to do anything here, which is the dispatcher. It's fully controlled by dispatcher or control operators. They line it just like they would anything else. And then you have a manual Z interlocker. It's part manual, part automatic. One route is controlled by the dispatcher. The other route is going to be automatic. An example of this is in Conroe, where we're CTC, BNSF is track warrant. So we are manual on our side. Dispatcher controls everything in there for us. When BN is on approach, they are dictated by whatever's happening automatically on their end. And this is actually down here in Houston. This is the BNSF Houston sub. This is the East Belt connector, and this is the Houston West Belt. And then this is also belt junction. These are the examples of some mainline crossovers. So this is from number 2. This is a middle connecting track, and then this is number 1. So there's 1 crossover, 2 crossovers, and then the number 2 connects to the connecting route right here before you get to the bridge. And then this switch is where the East Belt turns off behind me right here. You have East Belt, and then West Belt. Track warrant is what we refer to as TWC. It's authorizes a train or engine to occupy the main track within the designated limits in a territory designated by the timetable. Generally, these limits are going to be station names, mileposts, CPs if the territory turns into CTC or joins a CTC territory. And then there's other times, there's other defined points will be called out in the timetable specific. It could be a road crossing. I mean, it could be a jailhouse. We have one called jailhouse. The jailhouse isn't even there anymore, but that's what it's been for years, and that's what they refer to it as. Sidings in TWC can either be non-controlled or controlled. Non-controlled siding doesn't require the train to be granted permission to occupy that siding, nor do they need to contact a dispatcher or control operator for any moves they make in that siding. As long as their warrant gets them access to that switch to enter, once they're in and they line and lock the switch back main to main behind them, they are the sole occupant and controller of that siding. Then there are some sidings in track warrant control that are controlled, and they are operated just like a CTC siding. BNSF has this on their route going north of Fort Worth up to Amarillo in some spots where you'll see they'll have a siding and it'll say begin CTC, and then as you come out the other end, it'll say begin TWC or ABS, and they just control the sidings themselves. Everything else is track warrant in between. We don't have too many lines like that presently. As we expand our capacity in track warrant territory, we're starting to bring more and more of those online. And then switches in TWC, generally 3 types: hand throw, spring, or DTMF. I kind of already went over the DTMF earlier and how that works. Hand throw is exactly what it sounds like. You get out, you throw it, train comes in, you line and lock it back behind them. A spring switch, it's a hand throw switch, but it has a spring housing in between the switch points. Its normal position is main to main. You have to line it to come in, but as you're coming out, you don't have to. It opens and closes underneath the train as it comes out. We have those on the Monroe sub, which is actually CTC, and we have them on the NS sub as well. We have them all across our system on dark and CTC systems.
Just don't try to back up your train halfway
Nope.
through the spring switch.
Yeah, we've had a few guys try to do that, and it's made me some money back when I was on track. And then signaling in TWC works 2 ways. Dark, which is where the term dark territory comes from. There's no signals out there whatsoever, so you're running purely off your bulletins and station points until it converts into CTC, ABS, or possesses maybe an interlocker and then goes back to CTC or TWC on the other side of that interlock. ABS is automatic block signals, and the signals are approach lit, and the trains control the aspects of those signals. They stay dark unless there's a train present. Dispatcher does not control them. As the train approaches a green aspect or clear, the trailing block will be a red aspect or restricted if the train is still in that trailing block. If the train is cleared, the block signal then goes dark until the next train. If there's a train following it, then the signals that train is seeing will be dictated by the train, where the location of the train is in front. And approach.
Unless you Jimmy rig the signals.
Correct. Which, again, people have done that, and I've made plenty of money.
And that's where a pair of jumper cables on your train works.
Right. Other forms of signaling, automated cab signals, or ACS. I'm sure people have heard of this. It works in conjunction with wayside signal equipment on both track 1 and CTC. Displays both the approaching signal and the signal of the block the train is in. Illinois Central, UP, and C&W adopted this system on routes where visibility of wayside signals could be inhibited by blizzard conditions. Examples are Union Pacific's Laramie, Rawlins, and Sydney subs going up to Powder River. Automatic train control is ATC. This is basically an early form of PTC, but very limited in its application. It again works in conjunction with the wayside signals and equipment installed on the locomotive, and it arranged so that automatically result in the application of air brakes to stop or control a train speed at designated restrictions based on the what information is loaded into the system. It works in conjunction again with cab signals on ABS or CTC. One of the places we still use it is on the Roseville sub. I think we did have it on the Canyon sub along the Feather River route. I don't know if it's still operational anymore. I think we mothballed that system there and went purely CTC. And this is what, in the locomotive cab, this is what your cab signals would look like. And then here, I'm not, if you guys want me to stop on any of these, just tell me. These are just standard signal dimensions and standard signal types. Again, this is all very modern and prototypical through UP, BNSF, and some other railroads. I know we have some more historic guys that do stuff post or pre all this, so this may not apply, but it's there for reference. These are the different types of Jorf signals we have. This is wayside. This is where the ladder's behind. And again, it's got all the dimensions here. So if you want to prototype scale it, you know, since this is being recorded, you can see it. This is where the ladder's on the side. This is a more standard approach that we're going to these days. And that would be, this would be like an absolute signal right here since it's just on one side. This is more of an intermediate unless you have a CPs back to back. And again, it's just the difference of ladder on the back, ladder on the side. And then this is the type where we have it actually mounted on the cabin itself. Is everybody bored yet, or y'all want me to keep going?
No, rock on, dude.
All right. So at-grade crossing systems that have warning devices are typically going to work on one of two things, motion or a constant warning system. Motion sensor systems are increasingly rare as time goes on, and they're more restricted to industry leads, short lines, and if there's a track that comes out of a yard or terminal through a crossing, it sometimes will be a motion. Basically what it is we set up detection devices on either side of the crossing so many feet out depending on the speed of the track. Once the train enters that envelope, then the gate system starts working and starts to activate. The problem with this is if the track is in the system is designed for 40 miles an hour, but the train enters that approach at 25, it starts working no matter what speed the train is at. So at 10 mph, that system's working and that train is still way out there and it takes forever to get there. And so that's one of the reasons why we're starting to slowly we're getting away from these at an alarmingly fast pace, just because it causes people to be impatient, run the gates, and that's how we end up with some of our close calls and incidents. The more common thing that you're starting to see now is what's called constant warning. So it's always active, it's always linking, it's always looking out from the crossing for a train entering the approach. Once that train enters, the system starts calculating internally based on how quickly the approach window is. So as the train is closing the distance based on its speed, that's telling the system when it needs to actually turn the lights on and then start the gate drop sequence. So it's all dictated on the speed. So if it's at 60 miles an hour is what the system is designed for, but the train comes in at 40, it won't start right when the approach is entered. That train can be in the approach for several seconds, and then the gates will start activating based on the timing sequence. That's the minimum FRA timing requirements based on that train's speed. And then as it decreases up to the approach, it will compensate and it won't drop until it determines and calculates when the train will actually be there. Does that make sense? I know it can be a little for some people, and I may not have done the best way of describing how that works.
You did good.
Okay. It took me a while to figure it out when I first got into this group. And then this is where we're going to get into the preemption and advanced preemption of grade crossings. Perfect example of where you see this is along US 377 there in Keller, Fort Worth, and all that along the UP's Choctaw subdivision. There is advanced preemption all up and down that corridor. And so basically how it works is the average railroad crossing is on a 25-second cycle time. 20 seconds plus for the buffer time. That's the FRA minimum. Most railroads don't go past that. This means from the moment the lights start flashing, the gates must be fully down in 25 seconds and everything's restricted. Advanced preemption adds additional warning time in the background. And what this does is, so if you have a traffic light at an intersection right next to our tracks, what advanced preemption does is our system is hooked up to whoever runs that traffic light. It's hooked up to their controller and they talk to each other. So as soon as our system detects a train is on approach, and what we do is we push it out further than we normally would. The crossing looks further out down the line than it normally would if there's no traffic light there at all. Once it detects that train is on approach, it sends a signal to the traffic control signal or the traffic signal controller, and the traffic signal starts cycling off cycle. And so what it does is it puts everything to red and turns the light for dictating traffic across our railroad tracks, turns it green to start clearing everything out and getting stuff off of our track. While this is going on, our system is still calculating the approach of the train so it can still meet that 25-second minimum. Once it hits that, the traffic light stays green, and then our system starts to activate, the lights and gates come down, and once they're down and the train is in the crossing, then the traffic signal goes to what's called a limited service, meaning the light that was green to clear stuff off goes red, and then everything on the parallel route starts moving again, but no traffic is given a signal to proceed onto the approach to the crossing until the train is clear. Once the train is clear and our gates recover, then it cycles off cycle again to start clearing the queued traffic from the train to start resetting the traffic pattern as normal. And then once all that's done, then it goes back to its intended operation until the next train arrives.
They do that up and down over at Saginaw, Maine, 281 at Bailey Boswell too, where you've got BNSF and UP traffic going across there, right?
That's correct. A lot of Class 1 railroads are starting to adopt this system in major metropolitan areas or where they have parallel routes that are very close. It's not cheap, but it's good, and a lot of the states and agencies like working with us on it because it keeps the motoring public safe. And that's another time when you can call that ENS number when the traffic lights are flashing red because of a power outage. It's not talking to our signals properly. So the traffic light will not operate as intended when a train is on approach. So that's a good thing to call into whichever railroad it is to let them know. They can slow order those trains.
Eric, you had a picture a minute ago of a at grade crossing example that had the arms dropping across a pedestrian sidewalk. Is that getting more and more prevalent?
Yeah, as we For us internally, we don't really like sidewalks, but we recognize that they're not going away. So yeah, it depends on what the agency's willing to pay for, honestly, on these. There's various forms of this. This is just one example. Some of them have just gates like you would go through to get into a baseball park. And what they are is they're linked to the system, so they're magnetic. So when a train's on approach and the gates go into a gate down position, it locks that gate so you can't go through it on either side. But what it allows is if you're in between the gates and that system goes active, you can push it away from you to clear the track. You just can't push it in to get to the track while the system's active. But this is just another version here that we have. These are you'll see these a lot along the metro lines in Chicago. This is kind of what they have adopted, is these individual gates. Sometimes it's just mast flashers. It could be a stop sign that starts strobing around the edges. I mean, anything's on the table as far as the sidewalk.
I've seen these on the Tex rail.
I'm not sure where these are. These are not. I don't even know if this is one of ours. I think
there's one at Haltom Road on the Tex rail.
Okay.
Where it goes across right before it crosses the Iron Horse Golf Course.
Okay. Well, and something is pending. Something similar is also pending in Burleson. Something similar.
Yeah.
So, and I will skip this part other than there are standards for the crossing systems, number of lights, dimensions, all of that, and gate lengths. Generally, you don't want anything more than 32 feet for a gate. That starts to increase wear and tear on the motor. And it's also a hazard for our guys if somebody hits it and trying to reinstall one. Anything over 32 feet is typically going to be an exception, and you won't see it too often. This is an example of just a standard one. You got two lights facing the direction of travel, and two lights facing the opposing traffic. And these will typically be pointed this direction. Same with these are pointed this direction. If it's just a 2-lane road, you're going to have 4 lights on any gate. That's just standard. Bell placement will be either on the top or down low behind the lights. We're going more to the down low behind the lights. These tend to be lightning rods, and they also have dictated the FRA and MUTCD has recommended us putting them down low like this because they're closer to pedestrians so they can hear them better, whatever. And then also the number of tracks that crossing crosses will be dictated here, should be as well. This here is one with median gates and has side lights. Side lights are generally for a parallel route, and they will be directed at that parallel route. So as they're coming up and the gates are active, there's been instances where people claim, well, I didn't see the lights because I was next to it. Well, now you don't have that excuse anymore. Generally on medians, you will not have what's called backlights, which are the lights facing the oncoming. They'll just be facing the direction of travel. But depending on what the agency that wants this done decides, they can put lights, they can put as many lights as they want. But there are minimums. And generally, it'll be no backlights in the median itself.
You probably know the answer to this question in your current job. What is the cost of just without the crossing arms, just the vertical with the round lights that flashing that says railroad crossing on it, and the support mast for it? Typically, what does that cost?
Honestly, don't know because we don't put those in anymore. We require lights and gates at a minimum. If it depends, if it's brand new, doesn't exist today, all said and done, just for the signal portion, like let's say it's a new road, minimum for a 2-lane, $500K.
$500,000.
Just for the signal system. That doesn't include the surface work. If it's an existing system and you're upgrading it, that's all subject to a lot. If it's an old motion system and you're going to constant warning, you're starting at about 400.
Well, the reason I asked the question, the Texas Western just got a donation from the BNSF of flashing lights and the crossbucks and the mast and the electronics to make it work, and they just install it outside the front entrance to the club. And I was just curious about what that cost.
Oh, just the individual, just the individual one. Yeah. I honestly couldn't tell you. We don't price it out that way. We basically, agency says this is what we want, and it's a bulk item.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's that's how we break it down.
Got it.
So, this is what we call a cant liver. What this is for is per the FRA and MUTCD, and MUTCD is Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. They have a section for railroads. And AREMA is another agency that has say in this. You have to have a set of lights for every lane of travel. So in this one, you have 2 lanes and a turn lane. This one's a little excessive. You didn't necessarily need to put this light out because these actually will cover that insidemost lane. That's what they're there for. So these set of lights aren't necessarily required. But since you can't get a light for the middle lane, that's where a cant will come into play. On 4-lane roads with medians, you can either do a cant if the road widths are narrow enough to where you can just get away with the one gate, and then you can just put a cant up. If you exceed that 32 foot with the gate, then that's when the median gates come into play, and then these will become the lights that govern this lane. And again, you have side lights here, and this is a preempted crossing right here, obviously, as you can see the traffic light. But yeah, cant levers come in different lengths. This is pretty much a standard style you see across the system anymore for these. And the way ours are set up, they're 3 feet behind the gate. We always put ours behind the gate. Or generally, actually, this one's actually a little oddball. I take that back. We generally put ours in front of the gate. BN has been known to put theirs behind. We put ours in front, so if somebody wipes out the cant and the gate survives, you still have some type of restriction to the crossing. But I think this one was an older system, and we just put it in front of the cant. Got an exception from TxDOT. And then placement and orientation, again, I talked about that. If it doesn't have curbs, 8 foot 3 inches away from the edge of traveled way. If it does have curbs, you place the gate and cant 4 foot 3 from the curb, unless there's an exception to that. And generally, if the road is at an acute angle to the track, you move the gate far enough out to where you can have the gates and lights 90 degrees to the road and the gate tip 12 feet from the center line of the track. And then these are some of our just standard. This is what you guys got. It's just got matte side lights here, but this is similar to what you guys got. And then this is our standard gate dimensions. And then for those of you that like signage and pavement markings and all of that, you can go to MUTCD online, go to Part 8, and all of that information, dimensions, schematics, and applications are all in here. There's even stuff for light rail information in here. They actually have pavement markings somewhere. Oh yeah, there you go. Getting to those now. That's pretty much all I've got.
Hey, Eric, great job. Great job. We sure appreciate it. I wanted to hang on just a second here. I want to come back up here and let everybody express their appreciation to you for you. Let's see here. There's got to be a place in here where I can unmute everybody. I sure thought I had it. But anyway, we appreciate everybody to letting you come in, or having you come in and talk to us all. You did a great job. If there anybody have any questions for Eric while he's here, David, go ahead. Hang on a second, David.
Okay, I'm in.
There you go.
Okay, I live along the Choctaw Sub and up in Roanoke in the industrial area at the crossing, and I can't remember the name of the street, but it's just the one right north of 170. At the crossing, there are these tube masts that are facing the tracks with flashing red X's on them. What are those for?
Oh, that's right. I forgot we have a quiet zone. So that's a quiet zone. But there's two. It's not really a quiet zone because I'm sure you've been there and you'll hear a digital horn sound. Have you? Okay. So what those are indicators to our train crews that the system is acting as intended. So if they're flashing on the approach, of a train, that alerts the train crew that, hey, you don't have to blow your horn here. The wayside horn, which is what those digital horns are called, they're active and operating as intended. If those go off, then the train crews are required to blow their horn through the crossing. And what those speakers do, those horns do, is rather than when you go through a train, the decibel level is like at minimum 92 when they're blowing the horn, and then it just reverberates throughout everything. And, that's very focused, and it focuses straight down to the line of traffic. You can stand next to it, you can barely hear it. But when you're right in front of it, it focuses that. So it's basically a form of quiet zone, and those are just wayside indicators is what those are.
Anybody else have any questions? Joe?
Yeah, I've seen on the news where ATC is becoming common with the commuter and passenger trains. Do you see any indication where that's going to happen with freight as well?
Not really. ATC is good for commuter and light rail because they're lighter. They're easier to stop quicker. As you've seen just under normal operations, they can pull up to a station and stop pretty quick and easy. ATC won't really work at full track speed for higher speeds like 40 and up because of the sheer velocity momentum. PTC for Class 1 railroad is basically supposed to act in place of ATC. And what PTC does, PTC looks further out than an ATC system will to start working the issues and taking control of the train prior to any event occurring. So that's why we don't really have ATC anywhere else other than on the Roseville sub on our system. And that may be going away now that our PTC system is fully online.
All right. Any other questions? Thanks, Joe. Eric, one thing here. You had mentioned that you're currently working with the folks at the Texas High Speed Rail. Can you give us any updates on what that project is?
Unfortunately, I've signed an NDA and I cannot.
Okay. Hey, you gave us that heads up early on that there might be some stuff that you couldn't talk about. So
no.
I had been talking to those folks about the possibility of including them as part of the 2023 convention was the reason I was asking the question. So I had talked to them previously, and I can get back in touch with them direct and ask the question. So
I can say our involvement is minimal than the Dallas and Houston corridors where they directly affect us. Outside of that, we don't really have any involvement. But that's about all I can say as far as that goes.
Sure, no problem. Well, thank you. Eric, great job. Good job, guys. We really appreciate it. Thank you. We appreciate you doing all the work you did. It was very obvious that you put in a lot of effort for this. Anybody else have anything before we adjourn? It's 12:16. We're just about right on track for where our normal meeting is. All right. And my apologies, Mr. Galvin, to you for not getting you an article this month for the whistle. It's been kind of a hectic month. I've been going through some health issues myself and had some people come in from out of town. So there's been some things that had precluded me from turning in my normal article. But the reason you didn't get a whistle this month has nothing to do with Mr. Galvin. That's all on my shoulder. So I apologize. Mr. Galvin does a great job. By the way, Mr. Hager, you had indicated that you would like to help us with some delegated responsibilities, and Mr. Galvin is looking for a helper on the newsletter. If you would be interested in helping him to be a person to help with the monthly newsletter and help coordinate that, and maybe take it on every other month or something like that to give Mr. Galvin a rest, that would be something that the division would really appreciate your help in. So if you're interested in doing that, contact me offline, contact Mr. Galvin directly, and we can go from there. But I'm not going to try to force you in making a decision here just this second with me just springing it on you. All right? So, but I do appreciate you raising your hand as wanting to accept some responsibilities and some delegation. That was very magnanimous of you, and I appreciate it very much. Guys, great meeting. At least I thought it was a great meeting. I hope you did as well. We'll have another great meeting next month, and look forward to seeing you all at that time, if we don't see each other before then, in some shape, form, or fashion. I do need to ask a question. Is there anybody on the call here that is a Easy DCC user? If you are, raise your hands besides myself. Tom, do you have your throttle bus set up where you can plug in tethered throttles? You're muted, Tom.
No, I'm on radio control.
Radio control. Okay. I'm trying to, Mr. Palmer and I are trying to work through some issues of getting the throttle bus set up on my system. And I think that I just don't have a couple of wires hooked up correctly. And I'm trying to just pick somebody's brain that's got it set up. So that's the reason I was asking the question. Speed?
Well, I've had it in the past. So, you can always toss your question out and I can always say no.
Okay. I'll try to do that. And thanks, Mike. I'll call Howard and talk to him if I need to. Speed, what do you got?
I want to talk to you when the meeting is over, please.
Okay. All right. Everybody else, thanks. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And we will talk to you on the next go around. Thanks, guys.